Hello, everyone. Mr. Clinton, well, we're going to start this meeting. It is Monday. It's October 15th, and I will call this meeting of the Norfolk City Council to order. This is an open meeting, and posted in the corner of this room is the actual Open Meeting Act, made accessible to anyone that wants to review that. I would ask if you would all stand with us for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Beth, we'll continue with roll call.
Hoy.
Here.
Lange.
Here.
Merrill.
Here.
Clausen.
Here.
Murin.
Here.
Brenneman.
Here.
Faust.
Here.
Saunders. Here.
Under action, I would ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented you.
So moved, Your Honor.
Second.
Motion with a second to approve the consent agenda. Please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative.
All right, and as well, approval of the full agenda as presented you.
So moved, Your Honor. Second.
Motion with a second to approve the full agenda again. Please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative.
Okay. Under special presentations tonight, we're looking at Economic Development Report. I believe that's going to be you, Courtney.
Good evening. Courtney Klein-Faust, the Economic Development Director for the city. Thanks for having me. Just wanted to share briefly, for the past 4 months, economic development has been under the City of Norfolk. Previously, it was housed under the Elkhorn Valley Economic Development Council. And so wanted to share with you essentially a roadmap for how we're moving forward with economic development, particularly now that it's under the city. There are a few major areas that we look at with economic development where the lion's share of our focus is. One of those is business retention and expansion. That would be existing industries, existing businesses that we have in our area, employing residents of our community and surrounding communities, paying taxes, etc., buying equipment. It's very important that we spend a lot of time going out and establishing or reestablishing connections with these businesses, understanding what all of their needs are, including workforce needs, supply needs, infrastructure needs, etc. And so a lot of our time, Candace Bozard, who works under me, a lot of our time is going out and working with these existing employers, determining what needs they have, trying to meet their needs whenever possible, and at the very least identifying trends that we're seeing among all of the employers. We make what we call business retention and expansion visits frequently. We've identified the largest employers in the community, and that's where our main focus is at present. We have some 600 employers, so we don't get to everybody every year. We have to prioritize. But these visits are very important, and that is our large priority. Approximately 80% of our time is focused on existing businesses and retaining those jobs and showing them ways in which they might be able to expand. Another aspect of economic development on which we're focusing is business attraction. And this entails quite a few things, and it's something that we are essentially laying the groundwork for at this point in time. With business attraction, we're looking at businesses that don't have a presence here in Norfolk, and we want to recruit them in. We need to do some additional work when it comes to industry targeting. Who is it specifically that we want to invite into our community? We need to know who does our workforce fit with, what types of industries, so that we have a workforce here capable and able to go to work for these employers before we can successfully attract them. We also need sites for industry development. At present, we don't have a great deal of sites that are developed to the extent that we need possible to be successful with business attraction. And so that is one of my first priorities. We've begun working on this, identifying where potential sites could be, what type of infrastructure we would need, how we could market these sites to make our community more attractive. We'll only be as successful as we allow ourselves to be. Other communities are working very hard, preparing sites, have industrial sites, have spec buildings where appropriate, and if a business comes in and sees that they've got a long lead time before they could ever actually start operations in Norfolk, that puts us behind the game from the get-go. So that is another area on which we're working. The industry targeting, determining who it is that we want to recruit to this area, and then having sites available for those types of industries. Another point that I wanted to share with you on industry targeting, one of our main areas of focus will be on those types of industry that will complement existing industry. Talking to our existing businesses, finding out who are their customers, who are their suppliers, what are we lacking here in the area, if there are some ways to create some economies of scale, so that if we bring in a new business, it will not only be successful here, but will also help our existing industries be more successful. So that's what we'll be focusing on. Those are the two big areas on which we're focusing for economic development, the business retention and expansion and the business attraction. Other areas that we do work on, entrepreneurship and small business assistance. We have quite a few entrepreneurs in this community. We want to encourage additional opportunities for entrepreneurs and provide them with assistance and knowledge, and additionally support small businesses. Our focus isn't solely on our largest employers, but also on small businesses in the community. It's really the backbone. Additionally, we look at workforce development, making sure that we have the skilled workforce that we need to support our existing industries and also to position ourselves to attract additional industries into town. Housing, if it's sort of hand in glove with that, we don't have housing, it's very difficult to recruit the workforce in, and so that's another issue on which we work. We're very excited to report that there is an incredible level of cooperation and collaboration among many different organizations in the community right now, specifically with economic development. I am so pleased to be able to report that we have incredible relationships with Northeast Nebraska Economic Development District, with the utility providers, with the Norfolk Area Chamber, with the Visitors Bureau, on and on. So lots of very exciting things going on. It's difficult in this forum to share any of the specifics because most of it's confidential, but we have quite a few things in the hopper. With that, I'd like to open it up to any questions that council members might have.
Courtney, do you want to address a little bit the way that the, for those, I know that we worked with DED on the film group that is here, and I think that's important to know how that came together as well.
Absolutely. And that's actually an organization that I neglected to mention earlier, but our relationship with the Nebraska Department of Economic Development right now is very strong. We were made aware that Alexander Payne was looking for some locations in which to create his home base to film Nebraska. Some inquiries were made. We were made aware of this by the Department of Economic Development, and we jumped at the chance, told them, that we would be ready, willing, and able to assist them with this project and to accommodate them in any way possible. We were in competition with a number of communities around the state, and quite frankly with other states, because the state of Nebraska does not have any tax incentives for films. So obviously the studio was looking for some state that would offer some of those incentives. It's been a great partnership so far. They've got about 100 people here in town spending a lot of money in our community. Their overall budget for the film is $13 million, and they've indicated they'll be spending millions of dollars while they're here. I think their hotel bill alone, or hotel bills alone, will be upwards of $500,000, and that's just one item, one expense that they will have while here. So it's a great opportunity for our community, and bringing us some additional recognition too. And that was a lead directly from Department of Economic Development, and we are getting additional leads. And it's also a great example of all of the cooperation and collaboration that we're having in the city, because the Chamber and the Visitors Bureau, along with the city and Norfolk Area Economic Development Council, have really been working hand in hand to make sure that they feel welcome and can find everything that they need. So,
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Courtney, you'd outlined several things here for us to think about in the near term. Can you prioritize? Is there a short list of things that you feel would have a greater impact on the community in terms of siting?
What we're looking at right now is working with a consulting firm to identify sites. This is going to be a little bit of a long process in order to do it right. I mean, we could go out and just get options on some sites now, but if we don't know who we're targeting and what kind of infrastructure we need there, it's an exercise in futility. And in order for us to continue our good working relationship with the Department of Economic Development and for them to pass leads along to us, we really need to be prepared on our end, and that means having sites available for the types of industries we're targeting. So this will be a relatively lengthy process, but a necessary one. First, we will identify potential sites along with our industry targeting. Then we'll narrow that down and determine which of those sites would be best suited to the industries that we are targeting. Then we will put in some funds into doing some master planning for those sites, so that by the time we're finished, we have a book about 1.5 inches thick on each one of these 3 to 5 sites that we can share with site selectors and businesses that we're recruiting. They'd have all of the engineering information that they'd have. They'd be able to actually see how their plans would lay out on the site. They need rail access, which is a big thing for most of the industries we're targeting. They can see how rail would be laid out, what the timelines are, what the costs would be, so that they know, coming to Norfolk, here's when we open up. This is how long it's going to take. This is what it's going to cost, and their CFO can make that determination. So that's priority number one. And while that's going on, we'll be out, of course, talking to existing businesses and making sure that they have an opportunity to expand. Business attraction is more exciting, thinking about bringing a new business in. What's more realistic, particularly for a community of our size, is expanding businesses that we have here now, including large employers who have opportunities, making them understand why expanding in Norfolk would be a good idea as opposed to another location, and offering incentives to do that. Albeit 40 is huge and will be utilized frequently by existing businesses. Adding 20 jobs here, 30 jobs there will make a huge difference. So,
Thank you.
Council, any other questions at all for Courtney? Okay. Thanks, Courtney.
Thanks again.
Appreciate it. Okay. Next, under presentations then, a presentation on the proposed ordinance amending Chapter 26 of the Official City Code to regulate illicit discharges and illegal connection to the storm drain system, stormwater discharge from construction activities, and post-construction stormwater quality by Jesse Poore, the stormwater management consultant. Jesse, we'll let you sign in for us if you would there too.
Yes, ma'am.
You might get your eyes.
Would you like me to move?
In the spotlight.
My name is Jesse Poore. I've been with Felsberg, Holton, Ulevig, and Omaha and Lincoln for 6 years. We have 2 graduates of Norfolk working for our firm, so we really appreciate Norfolk a lot, what they bring. But I'm an environmental planner. I help municipalities like Norfolk. With a population of 10,000 or more, you fit into the category of MS4, a municipal separate storm sewer system. And as As a result, you have a permit that oversees your discharge of stormwater. So if I refer to the term MS4 throughout the presentation, you'll understand I'm referring to you and communities of similar size. I do work with communities like Fremont, Columbus, Beatrice, Kearney, and others, as well as larger MS4s like Lincoln, Omaha, and agencies like Nebraska Department of Roads, all trying to figure out how best to implement stormwater management programs with the goal to meet minimum regulatory requirements within their agency or community, not wanting to go beyond those minimum requirements. I wanted today to give a brief introduction. I understand that this is an introduction to the ordinance that will be introduced in first reading at the following council meeting, so you'll have time to review it, look at the language, get additional public feedback before it goes forward. But we have had a public involvement session once already with builders and developers to introduce the topic. Norfolk, 3 or 4 years ago, completed half of their regulatory enforcement ordinance requirements, and that was the illicit discharge ordinance that's on the books right now. The other half is your ordinances that must oversee the discharge of sediment and other pollutants from development, otherwise known as construction and post-construction. So what we are proposing today is a common sense approach to achieve the minimum requirements that EPA and NDEQ have for communities like Norfolk and other MS4s to control pollutants entering the storm drain systems as a result of development. Without going into too much detailed background, clean water is not a new priority in our country as it regulates down smaller and smaller sizes to construction sites of an acre or larger, and small MS4s like Norfolk, 10,000 population or more. You're in a large boat of permittees that are trying to do the similar things that you're doing. In 2006, Norfolk was issued their first permit, which was a comprehensive stormwater management program that has been implemented by Jim Cook previously, and now Trent and Mark and others throughout the city. It's a very comprehensive program, and one of the planks in that program is a construction stormwater enforcement program. Nebraska National Home Builders Association is aware of these new requirements. As far as new is concerned, 1999 was when they were first put on the books, so 23 years old new. And in 2012, Norfolk anticipates, or 2013, 2012, Norfolk anticipates getting their next MS4 permit. Construction sites do discharge a lot of sediment, a lot of pollutants that are required to be regulated. It's not a myth, it's a reality. If you've gone out and sampled, like the photo in the picture there is from last year, a site that I visited just randomly took a sample of the runoff, and that sediment-laden water carries with it a lot of pollutants like heavy metals, nutrients that create algae blooms in our lakes and rivers, and other undesirable pollutants. And so what we want to do through this ordinance is not to pass a bunch of rules that burden development, but keep sediment on site. That's where we want to keep it. We want to keep it on the construction site. So the proposed ordinances are intended to revise existing rules and standards to address construction as it is in the development process, and the other requirement of post-construction. How are you addressing water quality after construction is complete? I want to underline and emphasize, star, and highlight, however I can make it obvious, that we are proposing the minimum requirements to comply with the EPA requirements that are on the City of Norfolk and others. Those minimum requirements, as defined, fall into 3 broad categories, and they're listed out further in definition here. But the City must require plan submittal from new development and redevelopment. Those plans must be reviewed and approved by the city according to their approved standards. They must conduct site inspections on approved construction sites, so going out and observing the physical condition of the site. And they must conduct enforcement when the site does not come into compliance as appropriate. And so within those 3 planks, those 3 legs of the stool, the city has flexibility in defining the program that they want to roll out. And we've been working with the city staff to find an approach that meets common sense standards and would work within the current approaches that the city does. So those are the 3 minimum requirements, and as long as we can demonstrate that you're achieving those 3 and can document that, I'll be satisfied that my job with the City of Norfolk is done. The first question out of the chute is who's affected, and really it is as a threshold of size of development. Any construction project that disturbs an acre of soil or more is required to have a stormwater permit with the state of Nebraska. And what this rule is requiring is that they get approval from the local jurisdiction. So the city of Norfolk will also provide approval for that site. Sites that are smaller than an acre, but are part of that larger common plan, so a subdivision or a plat that is a larger common plan that will ultimately disturb an acre, also must comply. And so that's how you get into these smaller home sites having to implement best management practices, or BMPs. The impacts are widespread, and sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not. City staff have additional plan review, inspection, and enforcement requirements. Developers now have to submit additional paperwork. Builders now have to put in best management practices on their site and keep their sites clean. Engineers and consultants need to be familiar with the requirements to help their clients. Trade contractors who deliver products and materials to sites need to be aware that there are stormwater controls that they can influence. Utility contractors and others, anybody that's on that site, will have some role to play in these requirements. A real briefly overview of what's included in the text of the ordinances. We proposed text that meets the minimum requirements with a workable strategy for Norfolk and the construction community. There are general requirements for all construction activity to maintain the site and keep sediment on the site. We've defined the building phase of development, and I'm going to come back to that here in a moment, but that's very important as far as that common sense approach. There are stormwater plan requirements defining what you have to have on your plan for your site for development. There is text for permanent water quality BMPs, or best management practices. These are the permanent practices that will stay in place after construction is done. Technical standards, specifications, and guidance must also be referred to in the ordinance to make sure that the city has an enforceable, defensible program. And finally, violations are spelled out as far as how the city can and will enforce and issue penalties should there be noncompliance. The building phase of development is a very important part of the common sense approach, and it's consistent with what other MS4s have gone along with, because if you're a large construction site developing an acre of soil or more, you have a large stormwater plan that you put together for that site, and that's submitted, that will be submitted to the city. But you can imagine the unbearable responsibility that would be for a small building site that just wants to get in, build their spec home, and get out. What we've proposed in other communities that's been very workable is this building phase of development where, as you can see behind me, maybe not in detail, but in concept, 3 very simple standard plates that the builder could come in and identify as reflective of their site. The only difference really is that the stormwater flows off the back of the lot, off the front of the lot, or off to the sides. They are equivalent in the 3 in that they require the same minimum requirements of perimeter controls, trash maintenance, discharge of pollutants, cleaning up the sediment from the street, real basic, simple principles of good construction stormwater management. Those are acknowledged when that builder comes in to get his or her building permit, and enforced as if it was part and parcel of the building permit. So not complying with, say, for instance, the perimeter control requirement or the track out cleanup requirement would be enforced just as similarly as a violation of the building permit. So it's a very common sense way to go about not having to issue a brand new permit just for grading and erosion control, and keeps things very clear in responsibilities. So we think that it's very workable, and certainly would look forward to more feedback on that. Really, the whole program breaks into 2 categories, and I'm not going to go into an immense amount of detail in that, but it really breaks down into sites that are larger than an acre. These sites already have to meet the state of Nebraska requirements and have a list of things that they have to do. And so really what the city is going to end up doing is confirming that those steps have been done, because the state's not doing that level of oversight. And so the sequence of development for those sites is very clear-cut. The sites that are less than an acre, they have a little bit different process that is a little bit more straightforward and follows along with what I just discussed as the building phase of development. Really does simplify what that builder has to do to be in compliance, and still keeps Norfolk in compliance with having to have an enforceable program. The third piece is the post-construction best management practices. This is one that does raise eyebrows at times, and a transition of engineering paradigm and how we treat stormwater on our developments. I will say, on the heels of the economic development presentation, there will be companies that are looking for green communities to build in because they value that. Stormwater solutions and stormwater management on site is one of the ways to promote green infrastructure. It's not always something that's valued by a developer, but at times it can be, and so this is kind of a tie-in there. But there is a requirement for the city to require some sort of treatment on site of stormwater that hasn't been there before. We've all seen the retention and detention to protect for flows and flooding. Now we have to achieve some level of treatment for water quality. Subtle differences, engineering differences in how you treat the water flowing off the site. There's more to come in that regard, but it does put in the text of the ordinance puts in the minimum requirements for post-construction BMPs. I can get into answering more questions about that as we go along. The next big question that comes up is what is the financial impact of this ordinance and this program, and I'll say that that is a very difficult question to answer. One of the most important things to realize is that it is already an existing requirement for construction sites anyways, to have stormwater management on their sites. It is enforced through the state of Nebraska. This is just bringing it to a local level. And so really a lot of the new costs are going to be added to the city's responsibility for oversight, enforcement, plan review, and inspections. But the real cost is to the builder and the developer to put in the best management practices to keep the sediment on site. And it is difficult to come up with a dollar number for a development because it's commensurate with the size and scope of the project. Another point that I'd underscore is that you're not alone. This is a requirement of other communities. Other communities just down the road even are trying to figure out how to require these things. And so there's not going to be a competitive disadvantage between you and Fremont or you and Columbus because you are implementing the same stormwater programs in that term. So hopefully that eases some concerns, but I know that dollars do speak louder. The second big question is how is this going to be enforced? Very important to make sure that we have an enforcement policy, which the city will have to define how enforcement steps will be taken for what violations. The most important thing is that Norfolk will keep all the efforts equitable. I think this is an opportunity to make sure that all development happens in a manner that's consistent with the standards, and that hasn't always possibly been the case in a lot of the communities. You'll have some builders and developers that are on board with the erosion sediment control and they do a really good job, whereas others will try and get by with the less than minimum and have specific observable impacts to the environment. And so we're trying to create an equal playing field. What the city of Norfolk will need to be able to do is document those enforcement steps to be able to prove that they are enforcing their program. So documenting inspections, letters of warning, issues of violations, and that those issues have been resolved will all be very important pieces of the city's program. And those are listed on that slide there. And what the ordinance does is gives them the authority to implement any of those procedures, verbal warnings on the site, compliance orders in the mail, stop work orders, and so on. And what the enforcement policy will stipulate in theory and practicality is when the city would actually go through and use those tools so that everyone knows and it's not a guessing game when a letter of warning will be issued and how long you'll have to comply on your site. So clarifying some of those confusion points that doesn't necessarily belong in the ordinance itself. That really is the overarching umbrella of the ordinance that's proposed to you. Again, it is intended to meet the minimum basic requirements for your MS4 permit, and the flexibility within how you roll it out is still to be developed within policies within the city. So with that, Shane, if I left anything out, certainly default to you.
No, I think that was just right, Jesse. We'll see if there's any questions from the mayor and council. Mayor and council, just want to let you know as well that staff's viewpoint of this is trying to move this forward in a simplistic manner as possible, just so we can, we can have a program that's we're required to have from the EPA and from the DEQ. Obviously, it's going to be managed on the local level, which most of these kind of programs are managed right here by your staff and by the developers and the contractors. We really are going. I think I'd say we're in the middle of the pack, I guess, in comparison to our sister cities out there. We're trying to learn from some of the folks that went before us, And most importantly, we're trying to develop the relationships in this particular program with our developers and our contractors that allow a lot of input, so we can manage it here locally for what's right for Norfolk, like we try to do. At the end of the day, we have to manage it. I mean, it's incumbent upon us to, as a city and a community, to do that, and we'll do that. But we're really going to open it up to more discussion as we go forward. I'd recommend to the mayor and council that we, as this ordinance, the draft ordinance is in front of you, as we get to a step where we're going to actually have you consider that ordinance, that we just do that on a first reading to give enough time to vet out all the intricacies of the ordinance and really get a lot of questions answered for our contractors and our developers. I know Councilman Clausen and I have visited directly about that, and he suggested that process, and I think it's a real valid process as well. So we're going to have more opportunity to have some more public input from the folks that are really affected by it, and that's our developers and contractors. So with that being said, I think, Jesse, if you have any questions, Mayor and Council, Jesse's here. We can take advantage of that. He's our consultant that we've hired to help us guide us through this process.
Jesse, I'd like to thank you for coming out and explaining that. You did a good job explaining it. And I do appreciate your comments, Shane, and thank you for bringing that up about the time frame, how we have to work this, because obviously, you know, it's something new, something that has to be digested. And I mean, yeah, we're talking about contractors and developers being affected, but ultimately it's the end user. And they're the ultimate people that are going to bear the burden of this, what we're trying to instate here. So as we move forward, I don't think anybody here is against, you know, doesn't want to be a, cause pollution and hurt our environment. But on the same token, as we work together, I think it's important we look at, you talked about minimum requirements, but economically feasible requirements. If we've got two ways of looking at it, what's more economical and what's going to work, because ultimately, like I said, the builders and developers are affected because they have to maintain their projects and maintain their land, but ultimately that cost is going to be passed on. So I think thanks for coming out, though. I appreciate it. But you talked about the water discharge, cleaning up the water discharge on a development. Could you just briefly talk about that? You don't have to go real detailed, but what that entails and what we're looking at there.
Sure, I'm clear on your question. Are you speaking of the development of the construction site, or after the site's done?
The development site. So if you have a lot subdivision, what you do, you talked about the green movement, where you can actually retain some of that water and reduce some water retainage. But if you do have discharge, you talked about treating that water. Right. That was my main question.
That's a great question, Shane. This is an emerging area of engineering and science and how these practices actually work with the environment. Our old paradigm was, let's get it off the site as fast as we can. The results of that, unfortunately, were very boxy stream channels that promoted no aquatic benefit other than getting the water off of your site for flooding purposes. What we're seeing in the area of engineering and natural resources is this opportunity to utilize the stormwater before you discharge it and actually treat it as a resource rather than a liability. So we do that through infiltration. It can be done as simply as a rain garden. These are becoming very popular. I know in Norfolk you have a few of those off the parking lot. Instead of discharging it into a curb and gutter system, maybe you give it a pre-treatment in a rain garden, or an infiltration trench, which could be a linear sand filter with an under perforated pipe that provides some treatment. It can be something structural like underground storage. We don't recommend those because they're not visible and they're difficult to maintain. There's very, very proprietary products like pass-through filter systems that will separate out the solids and you can vac them up later. There's porous pavements, which do get a bad rap for freeze-thaw and different things, but they do really work. And there's great testing being done in the pervious pavement industry that would allow a lot of that stormwater to flow through the paved surface in overflow parking areas or fire lane parking areas in different ways. So really it is a challenge to our current engineering paradigm and how we develop our sites. Some of the economics has been trying to look at, can we reduce the hard infrastructure costs for storm drain pipes and different things, or narrow our streets up so we have less impervious surface actually contributing stormwater runoff, and actually save the developer cost on the front end of their development. A lot of those things are difficult to project, and in a community like Norfolk, those are honestly more of a challenge to figure out because you have less development than a city of Lincoln or Minneapolis or something. So hopefully that kind of gives you a picture of the opportunities, but really the concept is, can I capture a certain amount of that water before it leaves the site, use it to promote rain gardens or vegetation or celebrate the water, as Portland, Oregon likes to say, before it discharges into your conveyance system. What that ultimately will do is shave off the peak that's discharging into your receiving water and provide better water quality habitat for the critters and the bugs. So, great question.
Okay.
Is there any way to determine the percentage of the cost? Would raise the cost a little bit? I mean, obviously, you say it may affect cost. It's going to affect cost, and as Shane pointed out, it's the end user that's eventually going to pay that. Is there a percentage out there that you anticipate?
If I may, I still would like to underscore that it's not a new requirement on your construction and development, but in terms of additional cost to just the overall general development, you've got ranges from anywhere from 10 to 25%, depending on the complexity of the site. City of Grand Island, which I do work with, is blessed with very flat topography. All they have to do is create a basic trench around their site, and they've got the whole thing dealt with because there's nothing going to get off the site. A community like Norfolk that has a lot of different topography all around the town is going to have to deal with it on a case-by-case basis. So it could be anywhere from 10 or less and 20, 25 or higher, depending on the complexity of the site. The more innovation you have, the more options you have, the better you'll be. So my suggestion would be get in and talk with Mark and see if you can find some solutions that are cost-effective, because we certainly want to get to the end goal with the least amount of cost.
Okay, anyone else have questions while we have the gentleman with us? Seeing none from the council. Anyone else that may have questions for him? We appreciate you being here, Jesse, very much. Okay. Are we ready to move on then? All right. We're going to go then to public hearings. Before us tonight, we have a public hearing to consider submitting a grant application to the Nebraska Department of Economic Development for a community development block grant in the amount of $10,500 to complete a needs assessment and a comprehensive revitalization strategy for targeted areas of the city. I will open the public hearing, and Lisa Hurley is here. Okay, Lisa, if you would, come forward and sign in for us. State your name.
Lisa Hurley with the Northeast Nebraska Economic Development District. This program is not a new program. The City of Norfolk has been involved with it over the last 6 years. It's time to update the community, the comprehensive revitalization strategy, and before we submit the application in November, we have to reach out to the community for comments. The City of Norfolk, once you guys decide to approve or not moving forward, the next council meeting will be requesting $10,500 in community development block grant funds to complete a needs assessment / comprehensive revitalization strategy for the targeted area in the community. The total project cost is $13,500, of which $9,000 will be utilized to complete the assessment and $1,500 will be utilized for the general administration of the grant. The City of Norfolk will provide a 25% match of $3,000 towards the project cost. The project will benefit at least 51% low to moderate income in the community, and that's basically it. I do have an update. The contract extensions amendments were approved that you had requested in September. The state has approved those from the last grants. You guys have questions for me? I think you're all familiar with the project, and I don't want to get too deep unless you want me to.
Any questions at all? Discussion? Okay. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone else that might have questions for Lisa while we have her before us? Okay. Thanks, Lisa.
Welcome.
One question, Lisa.
Yes.
the last time we did this, I know it involves some town hall meetings and some stuff like that. And I'm assuming we're looking at doing this same situation where they'll be getting together.
We are targeting more than what we did for the 2009 update, but less than what we did in 2005 when we started the program. So it will have more than, I think in 2009 we did 1 or 2 meetings. We'll have more than that.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else?
Okay, thanks for being here, Lisa. Anyone else that might have questions or wants to speak to this, as it is a public hearing? If not, then we're going to close this hearing. There is no action that we're taking tonight on this, so appreciate it again, Lisa, for you coming out and sharing with us. So we'll move forward then to a public hearing to amend the city's comprehensive plan from parks and recreation to industrial at 915 South Pine Street. I will open this hearing, and
Sit with this one as well.
You can combine with this one as well if you want.
okay,
Zoning
okay,
change.
all right. If I turn 21 and 20,
Oh, I'm sorry.
23.
yep, 21 and 23. Okay, we're going to combine 21 and 23. And 23, again, part of the public hearing will be at the request of John and Karen Dolphite for a zone change from R1 single-family residential to I1 light industrial. So again, both hearings are open, and we will look for some discussion. It looks like John is ready to state his name for us and tell his story.
My name is John Duppide, owner of John's Disposal here in Norfolk, and Honorable Mayor and ladies and gentlemen of the City Council. I'm requesting a zoning change for the following properties. Duppide subdivision lots 1, 2, and 3 from R1 to C1. Also Duppide subdivision lot 5 from R1 to I1. Our purpose of this request is to construct an office on lot 2. And also, due to the growth of our company throughout the years, we need to rezone lot 5 for our container storage. We developed a subdivision agreement with the city in 1988 with the intention to expand to these lots. Lot 1 is I-1 already, and the land south of Lot 1 is I-1 as well, which is where the postal annex is located. Therefore, no spot zoning is developed with respect to our request of changing R1 to I-1 at Lot 5. We are a small business that is growing and developing and providing new jobs. An example is the addition of the service to provide mobile on-site shredding of personal documents, safe side shredding. There will be no change in our current operations. This, of course, is an opportunity to have this undeveloped area finally developed with sewer and water. This is not a new company developing. This is a family-owned business since 1968, therefore an established track record of being a good neighbor. It's difficult to find an acceptable home for garbage trucks and equipment. This site has been acceptable since 1968. Therefore, it makes sense to develop this existing area. I encourage the City of Norfolk to continue to pave the path for small business growth. Thank you. Any questions at all?
Thank you, John. Any questions for him? None from the council? Okay. Anyone else that wants to come and speak to this issue? Seeing none? Let's see, then we will close the public hearing here after Beth gives us, I'm sorry, we better have the report first from the Planning Commission.
The Norfolk Planning Commission held a public hearing on September 5th, 2012 for an amendment to the City of Norfolk's comp plan from residential to industrial at 915 South Pine Street. The amendment is necessary as John and Karen Dolphite applied for a change of zoning from R1 to I1 on 4 lots in the area. The Dolphites want to build their business, office, and expand their business on the lots. The Commission recommended changing 1 lot to I1 light industrial and 3 lots to C1 local business, which allows development of the office and expands their storage. It is recommended to amend the comp plan to industrial and commercial. And then the Planning Commission held the public hearing on September 5th to consider rezoning the 4 lots from R1 single family to I1 light industrial. The neighbors voiced some concerns of industrial zoning so close to residential. The recommendation is to rezone the east lot, Lot 5, to I-1, allowing storage and expansion, and rezone lots 1, 2, and 3 to C1, local business, for the office building. The Planning Commission recommends the zoning changes on a 7-to-1 vote.
I did have one question. There's an existing residence on the property now, right?
There is, that's correct.
So that will fall to a caretaker's application? In this application, since it's a non-conforming, it's no longer residential, that residence will become under a caretaker exemption?
Okay, we're talking about Lot 1, I believe. Is
Yeah.
that correct? Yeah, Lot 1 currently is a 2-story building that's, home that's being rented out. So, we understand it'll go to C1.
John, do you want to go forward for us so we can make sure that we're hearing it and having it part of the hearing?
Certainly. Yeah, Lot 1 is currently, R1 is being rented out as rental property, okay, currently now. So we understand it's going to go to C1, that piece of property there. So, okay.
So does that change the implication of it since it's non-conforming?
I apologize, I'm just sort of filling in for Trent here this week, but it would be my belief, my interpretation of the code, that it could exist as a legal non-conforming building, carry on forever in that capacity, unless there's a cessation of use for 12 months, or if there's, if it was damaged by fire, tornado, it would be able to be rebuilt. And I'm sure they
Correct. Yeah, I understand that. Yes.
So he's forfeited that right, and C1 doesn't even allow the opportunity to seek the caretaker as an option. So that you have to get into one of the industrial categories to get to that. So I suspect you've made a calculated decision.
Correct.
You prefer to use it, and
That's correct. I understand those options. Yes.
Thanks. Thank you.
You bet. Good question.
Another question and Scott, you may be able to answer it. Lot 4 sitting out there, that's industrially zoned right now then? Or?
That is correct. That's okay. Where our trucks are currently stored.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else before I close this hearing? Okay, then we will close the hearing, and I would ask for, consideration of ordinance number 5232, amending the city's comp plan from Parks and Rec to industrial at 915 South Pine.
Your Honor, I'll introduce ordinance 5232 on first reading.
Second that, Your Honor.
Okay, we have a motion with a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, short title, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Madison County, Nebraska, amending the future land use map of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and providing for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
With that, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5232 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I move we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5232 on second and third.
I'd second that.
Okay, we have a motion with a second to suspend and act on second and third. Any further discussion? If not, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5232 carries on second and third.
All right, and then we will move to consideration of ordinance number 5233, changing the zoning from R1 single-family residential to I1 light industrial and C1 local business district at 915 South Pine Street.
Your Honor, I would introduce ordinance number 5233 on first reading.
Second.
Motion with a second. Any further discussion? Short title, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Madison County, Nebraska, amending the zoning district map of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and providing publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5233 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I would move we suspend the rules and consider ordinance number 5233 on second and third.
Second.
We have a motion with a second to suspend and pass on second and third. If no further discussion, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5233 carries on second and third readings.
Okay. Next is a public hearing to consider a blighted and substandard declaration for the area referred to as Ramada area, for the area generally located south of Omaha Avenue and east of Highway 81. I will open this hearing, and Courtney.
Good evening again. I just wanted to provide a couple of opening comments about the hearing on blighted and substandard declaration for this area before I turn it over to Lisa Hurley, who'll go over the blight and substandard study. This is an area, it's the southeast corner of 13th Street and Omaha Avenue. It extends east from Highway 81 over to Corporation Gulch, which would be just before Milk Specialties, and extends south from the 275 bypass, Omaha Avenue, to the railroad tracks. It includes a number of properties there, and the reason that we're looking at this area, this is the most heavily trafficked intersection in our community. There's a lot of potential for redevelopment of the area, but as you can all see in the blight and substandard study, and as you see any time that you drive by, there are some issues with redeveloping the property at present, and it, as you'll find from the blight and substandard study, and as Lisa will expand upon, it's met the objective and subjective criteria for blight and substandard. Essentially, there's no impact on the property owners in that area, declaring an area blighted and substandard. No negative impact. This just allows us to open up additional opportunities for redevelopment of the area, including the potential use of tax increment financing. So that I'd be happy to answer any questions, but most of them I'll refer to Lisa after she goes through the blight and substandard.
Any questions for Courtney at all before I let her off the hook? Okay, Lisa?
When we look at a blight study, an area to determine it blight and substandard, we have to look at 5 objective categories. In order to move on in the study, the area must meet one of those. One of them, which is the most common one, is the average age of residential or commercial units in the area. The qualifier is condition that the average age is at least 40 years old. This area hit that. We were able to utilize the data from only the properties that had a documented data construction in the assessment records down at the courthouse. That was 42.6 years old. So we were able to move on into the subjective category. When we did a visual assessment, we rate every property in the area. The buildings is what we rate. We rate dilapidated, poor, fair, good, and excellent. Out of those, a substantial number of deteriorated or deteriorating structures, we came up to 22.2% of the 27 buildings that were out there. So we hit that subjective category. We then had existence of a defective or inadequate street layout criteria. I think anybody that's tried to go back there to look at the properties have probably noticed that access is a little limited in the area. Faulty lot layout in relations to size, adequacy, accessibility, or usefulness was also met. And unsanitary or unsafe conditions, deterioration of the site and other improvements. Diversity of ownership criteria was also met. And that means if you have a developer coming in and you have to put multiple lots together that have multiple property owners, sometimes that can be a barrier to the development of the site. Deterioration of site and other improvements, which is your infrastructure. And there's some infrastructure challenges in the area. Existence of conditions which endanger life or property by fire or other causes, and any combination of such factors that impairs or arrests the sound growth of the community, retards the provision of housing accommodations, or is an economic or social liability and detrimental to public health, safety, morals, or welfare in the present condition and use. We have several pictures in here. We've been in the property records, and it fits within the categories extremely well.
And so what that allows?
That allows City Council to determine that it is blighted and substandard, which would open up the door for developers to come in and utilize TIF, which is the tax increment financing, and that is a very valuable tool.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
Any questions at all?
Do we have anybody right now looking at that land, or do we have some future people thinking about that? I know you can't tell me who, but
I can't answer that. I'll let Courtney take that one.
I have been trying to actively market that area. I've talked to one potential developer who is interested, but who's indicated they wouldn't be able to move forward with that property unless TIF, tax increment financing, were available because of the costs associated. And I plan to look for additional developers for that area.
thank you.
Any further questions or discussion? Lisa's ready to jump back up if anybody has any questions for her.
I guess not so much a question as a statement, and it should be noted, this isn't a slap in the face or anything on current property owners there. This is a tool for, our economic development, and it's a tool many other cities have used successfully, and we need to throw our arms around this and be willing to move forward.
I will tell you, as a business right next door to it, well, we're actually going to be noted as being a blighted area, but to us it's going to be a big advantage, I think. So, please.
I want to note also, it's not only for potential businesses coming in that Courtney could be working with, but any of the existing property owners. If you want to utilize TIF for an expansion of your own, if you're doing a renovation or addition onto your business, you qualify as well for the TIF. You just have to go through the steps, and so it opens up the doors to the current businesses that are there, not just anybody new coming in.
Thank you.
You're
That's
welcome.
nice to know. Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, Lisa, thanks very much. Appreciate your being here.
You're welcome. You guys have a good night. Speaking of.
All right. Okay. With that, then, do we have unless there's anything else on that, we'll let Beth give us a planning commission.
I have one.
You don't have one?
There's not one in here. I haven't found one yet.
Okay. I have a notation here, but I assume no, huh?
Yeah, here it is, okay. The Norfolk Planning Commission on October 2nd, 2012, reviewed the blight and substandard determination study for area referred to as Ramada area. The study was prepared by the Northeast Nebraska Economic Development District. The study comprises 27 buildings in the southeast corner of Highway 81 on 13th Street and Highway 275 Omaha Avenue. There are 20 commercial and 2 residential properties within the redevelopment area, which have dates of construction listed at the Madison County Assessor's Office. The average age of the properties in the area is 42.6 years, which fulfills the qualifying condition for average age of blighted and substandard property. Based on the study and its finding, the Planning Commission recommends declaration of the Ramada area blighted and as blighted and substandard.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we'll close the hearing. And I would ask for a motion to adopt resolution number 2012-42, declaring the area generally located south of Omaha Avenue as Ramada area blighted and substandard.
Just a second.
With respect to
Sure.
the resolution, I just wanted to point out that there is one change in the resolution that will be adopted as opposed to what was included in the packet. There was one typographical area where it referred to the Community Redevelopment Agency. It's the Community Development Agency. So,
Okay, all right. Thanks, Courtney. Appreciate that. So with that understanding, if there's no further discussion,
I would move consideration of ordinance 2012-42.
Second.
okay, we have a motion with a second. No discussion, then we will vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, Resolution 2012-42 is adopted.
Okay. Very good. Seeing nothing further on the agenda then, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone, for coming out tonight.
You need one.
Susan, it's nice to have you here. Appreciate it.